Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we would continue with the suggestions past the developers for January of 2025, and this time we're going to be having a look at a bunch of airplanes which were passed. One of them is one I've wanted in the game pretty much since I started playing all those years ago, so it'd be nice to give it a bit of a spotlight for you guys. Anyway, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to like the video and also subscribe. Let's get started. The first vehicle is a variant of the A4 Skyhawk, specifically the McDonnell Douglas A4M Skyhawk II. The Skyhawk is a single-seat, single-engine naval strike aircraft designed by Ed Heinemann. It was contracted for in 1952 in June, and 2 years later it flew for the first time. Having participated in numerous conflicts and still in service to this day, it is undoubtedly one of the most successful designs in military aviation history. The particular variant this suggestion is focused on is the A4M Skyhawk II, and it's the latest variant of this aircraft produced by the United States and was built specifically for the Marines, who did not want to give up on the A4 at a time when the A7 Corsair II was replacing it in their Navy. Two A4Fs were modified, serving as the A4M prototypes, and the production of this new model started in 1969. It first flew on the 10th of April 1970, and the first deliveries began taking place a year later, and gradually it was incorporated into Marine squadrons. The last A4M was delivered in February of 1979, marking the end of the Skyhawk production, and A4Ms remained in service with reserve units until 1994, and after that date, the only Skyhawks remaining in service with the Navy or Marines were two-seat trainers. The differences between the A4M and the earlier A4s start with quite a large one. They have a new engine, the P&W J52 P408, which was noticeably more powerful than the previous ones. Other improvements and also visual characteristics that were changed: it had a revised cockpit and larger canopy for improved visibility, ribbon-type drag chute, squared-off vertical fin for an IFF antenna, it had a heads-up display, increased internal ammunition for its 20mm cannons, canted refueling probe, integrated weapons display, and also delivery systems. They also had advanced electronics, the ALR-45V RWR, the ALE-39 countermeasures, and also the ALQ-126 deception jammer, and also the ARBS, which is also found in the nose of the Aviate-B and also the Harrier GR7. So technically, this vehicle is a large upgrade over the F4s that we have. We also have one of my favorite vehicles, the Avro Manchester Mark I. In the mid-1930s, the air staff believed that the heavy bomber would be the most effective weapon for both offensive and also defensive operations. This was the time where it was believed that the bomber would always get through, which made it an unstoppable strike weapon that could solve many issues. This was also a time of rapid technological advance, with engines increasing in both size and also power, and airframe manufacturing techniques making leaps and bounds from design to design. It was thus found necessary to design a new generation of bomber, which would carry heavier loads than existing types over longer distances. The air staff had also sent fact-finding missions to the US, and they were impressed by the projects going on at that point, with the aircraft such as the B-17 and also B-18 being drawn up and prepared for testing at this point. The UK issued two requirements, B-12-36 and P-13-36, which were both issued in order to provide a wide-ranging modernization to the British bomber fleet. For B-12-36, Shorts and Supermarine were chosen to produce aircraft, their designs becoming the Sterling and also the Type 317 respectively. Meanwhile, P-13-36 would ultimately lead to the Manchester and the Halifax. P-13-36 ran concurrently with the B-12-36 requirement, and aimed to achieve a relatively similar requirement, albeit on a smaller platform. In some documentation, it was referred to as a medium bomber requirement. though for all intents and purposes, it was a heavy bomber requirement. The aircraft was intended to be around the same weight as the Vickers Warwick, which was then in development, although smaller in size and also faster. The requirement called for a maximum bomb load of 8,000 pounds, with a range of at least 2,000 miles with this load, and 3,000 miles using a lighter load. A high cruising speed and altitude was required in order to provide the best survivability over enemy territory, with a speed of at least 275 miles an hour at 15,000 feet. Survivability also depended on self-defense, and the aircraft was to be provided with all-round cover through the use of machine guns. The weapons load was 8,000 pounds, with the option for two 18-inch torpedoes included into the requirement. Additionally, catapult-assisted takeoff was proposed. P-1336 was issued on the 5th of November 1936 to Avro, Boulton Paul, Bristol, Fairey, Handley Page, Hawker, Shorts, and also Vickers. Out of these companies, Avro and Handley Page were chosen to proceed with their designs. Avro's design was designated the Type 679, which had begun its design phase prior to the requirement. It was powered by two Rolls-Royce Vultures and had a twin fin, thus setting the basic lines for what would become the Manchester, despite being quite different in the initial phase. The tender conference was held on the 10th of February 1937, with Avro placing first, with two prototypes being ordered. However, the Air Ministry was quite anxious to get the 679 into production due to ongoing events on the continent, and it was thus ordered straight off the drawing board. The mock-up conference was held on the 4th of May of that same year. As development progressed, requirements changed, causing delays and adding costs. For instance, the catapult and torpedo requirements were dropped, which meant that these structures were now fitted with equipment which now served no purpose and simply added weight, yet would be expensive to remove, and removal would only add delays. The prototype first flew on the 25th of July 1939. Flight trials revealed further issues. The Manchester exhibited poor takeoff performance and had poor directional stability. The latter was rectified by adding a central fin above the gunner's position, but weight remained an issue for the Manchester. It was found that as development progressed, weight kept increasing, and in February 1939, it was found that the weight had already increased by 4,485 pounds, and another 550 pounds was yet to be added. Avro took drastic measures to reduce weight, including the replacement of the metal bomb bay doors with wooden ones, reducing the thickness of the covering skin, increasing wingspan from 80 feet to 90 feet, amongst other changes. Even still, Avro had to re-stress the aircraft 6 times. Further issues were caused by the problematic Rolls-Royce Vultures, which had woeful reliability. This caused Rolls-Royce to abandon the engine completely in 1941, instead focusing on the Merlin and also the Griffon, which made sense for them for a production standpoint, but effectively doomed the Manchester as a viable service aircraft. This came at the unfortunate moment at which production was ramping up and would force Avro to cut production in 1941 after just 200 aircraft were made. There were proposals to fit the aircraft with new engines, such as the Napier Sabre or Bristol Centaurus, but these never came to pass. By this point, the issue, which had caused the failure of both the Manchester and the Warwick B Mark I, had basically put the air staff off twin-engine heavy bomber aircraft entirely. This was mainly due to poor survivability and engine outperformance. It was due to this reason why the Manchester's stablemate, the HP-56, was never built in its initial twin-engine form, instead being rebuilt into the four-engined form, which was the Halifax, due to the aforementioned reasons. Avro thus resorted to building a four-engine variant of the Manchester, which, whilst facing some initial opposition, would eventually become one of Britain's most legendary aircraft. In the meantime, the Air Ministry was looking to up-arm the defensive armament of the existing bomber types in service, these being the Halifax, Manchester, and Stirling, with 20mm Hispano cannons. For the Manchester, this involved a complete redesign of the rear two-thirds of the aircraft and a widened section to fit the new quad 20mm turret, but this program never left the drawing board. The Manchester itself had a very limited service life due to the reasons mentioned previously. The first aircraft entered service in 1940, with the first operational use occurring in 1941 against Brest. On the 30th of May 1942, 45 Manchesters were used in the first 1,000 bomber raids in Cologne. The type was retired from frontline service that year, being used as a trainer up until 1943, when more capable types replaced it. But the best thing about this vehicle is it did birth the Lancaster, which is of course one of the iconic vehicles of the Second World War. For Japan, we have the Kawanishi N1K5J. In 1945, the Japanese Army and Navy needed aircraft that could intercept the B-29 bombers that were destroying Japanese industry. The easiest way to create a new interceptor aircraft was to convert existing fighters. Therefore, the Imperial Japanese Navy decided to convert the very good N1K fighter into a new interceptor. At the beginning of 1945, design work began on the new aircraft, which was designated the N1K5J. It was decided to use the powerful HA-43-11 engine, which was also known as the HA-211, which was to allow for easy interception of B-29 aircraft. It was also decided to change the appearance of the nose of the machine. When the technical drawings were ready, it was decided that in order to speed up the production of the prototype, they would modify an N1K2J aircraft. Production took place at the Kawanishi plant at Himeji. By June 1945, the prototype of the Kawanishi N1K5J aircraft was completed, and preparations were already being made for flight tests. Unfortunately, it was in June of 1945 that the factory and the prototype were destroyed by an air raid by B-29 aircraft, which resulted in the completion of work on this project, since it was bombed. The armament consisted of 4 wing-mounted Type 99 Model 2 20mm cannons, which would be quite nice, and obviously the engine itself, being the Mitsubishi Mk.I, it was an air-cooled 18-cylinder engine with takeoff power of 2,200 horsepower, which would be pretty fun. Technically, it could also bring rockets and bombs, but it obviously never got to that stage. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.